Hello, today I thought I'd take a little look at a picture I found on the internet. I'll do it in red pencil on brown paper. I'll start with some basic construction lines and then build up the face using shadow and volume, and we'll see where we get to. Starting with some basic construction lines. One line for the centre line of the face, and then I'll think about where the eyebrows, the nose, the chin are going to be. Just get some general proportions down before we start building from there. Since we know the distance from the eyebrow to the bottom of the nose is about the same as from the nose to the bottom of the chin, that gives me a few marks, and then I can think about where the eyes sit in relation to the nose and the eyebrows, and again where the mouth sits. Just starting to find a few shapes. I'm not thinking about detail at the moment, just basic shapes. So at the moment the nose is just sort of a block or an idea. Think about where the bottom of the nose is, where that sort of side of the nostril is. And from there I can then think about some other shapes, start to build up a few features. Since I know where my eyebrow line is and my eye line, then just a big oval for the moment will give me an idea of roughly where that eye is going to sit. With the eyes, we can think about where they line up on the face to give us an idea of where to start the eye from. In this case, I'd look at the side of the nose, and the eye itself usually starts just above where that nose is. So I've started to think about eyebrows, start to think about the general shape of what the eye is and how that's going to sit on the face. At the moment I'm trying to keep the pencil pressure really light, just make some very fine, faint lines. I'm not quite sure if these are the right places yet, but we're getting a rough idea. Once I'm more happy with the lines, I can go over later on and think about detail, think about actual harder, put more pressure on the pencil. I kind of move around the page quite a lot as well. I'll not concentrate on one eye or concentrate on the nose. I'll be having a think about how the eyebrow sits in relationship to the nose, where the mouth sits. For the mouth, I'm just thinking not lips at the moment, more just an overall shape. So how wide is the mouth? Where does the mouth sit? Or where do the ends of the mouth sit in relation to the eyes? As I go along as well, I tend to start blocking in some main shadow areas. It gives me an idea of where the shadows are starting to sit on this face. When I drew the eye, I knew that the eyebrow or the edge of the face was fairly close to the eye, and then once I had an idea of where the chin was, I could start to form that shape. Again, I'm not really sure exactly where it is, but I've got a rough idea. So I'm trying to keep the lines nice and light for the moment. That distance again between the nose and the eyebrow, or the chin and the nose, is roughly the same as the eyebrow to where the hairline starts at the top of the forehead. So that gave me an idea of where to start this hair from. And again with the hair, I'm not really thinking individual hairs or clumps of hair at the moment, just an overall shape. As you see, I've got some of the face drawn. I haven't really looked at the ear yet. I'm trying to work my way across there tentatively because I'm not quite sure about that distance. So at the moment I'm just thinking about the shadow, which is on the side of the forehead, wrapping underneath the cheekbone and down onto the bottom cheek. I think for me it's easier to think about where that shadow is, then think about where the ear is, because I can think distance from the nose to the edge of the cheek. Well, that kind of makes sense, just slightly over where the eye is. The ear at the moment seems too far away, so if I get that shadow in, then I can think about maybe what's behind that shadow, what's further away from it. As you'll see, I sort of almost wanted to have a look at the eye then, but then thought, maybe not quite yet. Maybe let's just have a think about where this nose is. Is this nose in the right place? With the eye, there's a few different parts to think of. There's the part of the eye we can see, with the pupil and the iris, and then you've got your lower lid, and then the upper eyelid, and then the sort of the muscles around it. So looking at the drawing I found, it was a fairly solid line which showed the outside of most of the eyeball, and particularly had the iris in. And there's something about drawing the eyeball as well, because all of a sudden the portrait starts to come to life. One of the things I'm thinking about as I go along this is where the shadow sits and what lines are the heaviest, what lines are the lightest. When I looked at the reference image, the eyebrows were quite strong, along with a few of the lines describing the eyes. And so I was feeling confident enough to start putting some of those in a bit more boldly, defining up where they are. When I'm looking at drawing some of the features of the eye, half the time it's not about drawing the eye itself, it's about just drawing the shadows you find around it. As I work my way around the cheek and think about some of these shadows, the ones that start to make sense to me, start to give the nose form or give the cheek form, I'll tend to work on a bit more and find out where they go to. Sometimes you find that different shadows all link up into one big massive shadow. As you can see with the bottom of the nose, by kind of putting in what I thought was the area of shadow at the underside of the nose earlier, it gave me a sort of working area about where I might be able to then place the nostrils and the sides of the nose. So some of this is about finding balance across the image as well. Having firmed up a few details on the eye and the nose, I thought maybe now's a good time to look at the mouth and start to firm up a few of the details there. And one of the things is this big cast shadow under the nose gives us a relationship then to the mouth. I'm not really looking at shapes in the mouth, I'm actually thinking which is the darkest area, which is the lightest area on this particular image. That sort of slight gap between the top lip and the bottom lip gives you this sort of darker line in the middle. And from there, the bottom lip, looking at the reference image, it almost felt like rather than trying to draw the lip, just drawing the shadow underneath the lip. One of the lovely things about the brown paper is that it effectively acts as a mid-tone. So rather than trying to find the lip itself, if you just find the sort of shadows around the lip, then the lip essentially just, or the bottom lip in this case, essentially just appears for you. One of the things you might notice as well is as I move around different places on this drawing, my pencil grip tends to change. Sometimes I hold it in the traditional way, like you would a biro or a fountain pen. Other times I'll sort of swap to, I think, what they refer to as an overhand grip, especially if you're trying to get some of the shading in. It gives you a much nicer, looser sort of back and forth motion to get some of that shading in. With this phase, while I'm thinking about shadows, I actually spend quite a lot of time looking at the reference image, keeping my hand fairly light on the page and glancing up every couple of seconds really, just to think about, is my shadow heading in the right direction? Is this mass about right? Is it describing the way the light's hitting the skin? And this is where the two hardest parts of this drawing start. First, finding where the ear is and the relationship of the ear to everything else, and then finding the placement of the jaw so it meets the ear. It's not a clear jaw line, it's more of just finding a few shadows that kind of go from the chin around to the where the ear is. And for me, the easiest way of thinking about where the ear is what's the distance from the centre line to the sort of front of the ear. Since I already have the face fairly well correct, then finding that distance from the chin to roughly around halfway up the nose, rotating the pencil around, that gives me a good idea of where the ear is. It always looks a bit further away than it should be, so there's always this natural tendency with everyone to pull the ear closer to the face than it actually is. But if you start to look at the proportions, you'll find actually the ear is quite far away. But having got the ear in, I can then find the other side of that hairline and then start to find the sort of the line or the shadow of where the jaw is and how the jaw connects back around to the ear. And then with that, find the line for the neck and the shoulder, just to give the head something to sit on. And then having a swap from a drawing mode to shading mode, the grip on my pencil has changed subtly. As you'll see with the neck, one of the things that changes two vertical lines to, oh, this is the neck, is just some shading. So finding the shadow underneath the chin, and then finding the shadow at the back of the neck, and maybe a few of the shadows as the sort of neck moves down towards the collarbone. That's what starts to give the neck life and give the head sort of a sense of sort of belonging, really. So having now found the main proportions of the face, I can actually start to think, is that far line of the face where the cheek and the chin all disappear around the side of the skull, is that correct? And having decided that, yeah, this is about right, it's a nice way of just putting some shadow on that inner side of the hair, and that pulls the highlight of that far cheek out nicely and gives the whole thing form. The ear on this drawing is an interesting one. It is surprisingly complex things to draw, but I think the artist who's drawing it originally didn't really want you to look at the ear, he wanted you to look at the beautiful face. And so the ear becomes a very, very simple, just sort of an outline with a faint shadow in the middle of where the inside of the ear is. The artist didn't really want you to look at the ear, he wants you to look at the eyes and the nose and wonder about where she's looking. So he's really drawn the ear with as little detail as possible. Similar with the hair, if you look at the hair isn't perfectly described, it's more of just a sort of a sense of the mass, because the artist is more interested in making sure you look at the face and not anything else. With this drawing, I kind of started off with a fairly well sharpened pencil, but didn't really sharpen it at any point up until just now. Keeping the pencil on its side and using it and letting it go a bit blunt and letting the sort of the line become thicker is great if you're looking at shading and you want that soft line, but the second you want to start adding a few crisper details towards the end of it, give your pencil a quick sharpen, and then you'll be able to put those finer details on. But you don't really need to keep your pencil sharp all the way through. If you just rotate the pencil around every so often, that sort of naturally will keep the pencil sharp for you. you're adding these finer details like the sort of tiny lines around the eye or things like that, it's a good thing to ask yourself, do I want to describe everything? Do I want to make all the details all the same or give them all the same weight? By adding extra detail to the eye and leaving the nose and the lips slightly less detailed, slightly less formed, it forces the viewer to look more closely at the eyes. As you can see with this, we're 22 minutes into the drawing, and so far I've not really even thought about the hair. I've got a rough idea of where it's going to be and what it's going to look like, but since the hair is secondary to the face with this drawing, then I can pretty much just leave it to last. Rather than get sort of sucked into organising the hair, then I can spend most of my time getting the details where I want them, which is the eyes in this case, and that expression, that kind of upward looking expression. That's where a lot of the emotion is captured with this particular image, I think. And as we go on with the shading, we're sort of looking around the face and thinking which shadow can go darker, which is dark enough already, which little areas of highlight do you want to get rid of. So finally onto the hair, having finished pretty much the face now. Kind of swapped pencil grip. I quite like this pencil grip for giving you more chaotic lines, more uneven lines. It kind of stops you being able to concentrate on a particular detail and forces you just to think about where the mass of the hair is, where the expression, the sort of the hair is moving, and finding some ideas of shapes. And that lovely sort of chaotic line kind of works quite well for the hair in this particular image, where the artist has chosen to just describe roughly some of the shapes and where some of the detail and some of the texture is lying. And there we go, that's pretty much me finished this one. Just to sort out a few tiny little details, a few extra little highlights or extra little lines in the hair. But otherwise, that's that one done. Quite enjoy doing these little faces from the Renaissance kind of period. So I'll do a few more and see where I can get to with filming them.